I have it as 6:35, so why don't we begin? So welcome everyone to the Committee of Budget and Fiscal Oversight. The purpose of tonight's meeting is to review input from councilors and make recommendations to the Town Council on the fiscal year 2022 budget policy guidelines. I'm Vinnie Piccirilli, I'm the chair. Councilor Angie Quinellis is the vice chair, and Councilor Anthony Donato is secretary. So some of you have heard this before who've attended meetings in past years, some of you are new. So we sent instructions to councilors explaining that the committee's task is not to decide whether each request is a good idea or not. Rather, this committee acts as an editor to take input from 9 councilors and synthesize it into a concise, actionable document for the manager. The committee may decide to defer a request because it, A, requires policy direction from the council before the manager can include it in the operating budget. B, is substantially complete. C, is too ambiguous to be included in the operating budget. D, is part of the capital improvement program and not the operating budget. E, is within the authority of another body who has not weighed in on it. Or F, overlaps with other existing goals or requests. So to facilitate the process, I've taken all the requests from the councilors in the order received into a worksheet for the committee to use based on last year's, the fiscal year 21 budget priority guidelines as a starting point. I do want to say that this year, one thing is this is different doing it by Zoom. Also, the budget uncertainty that surrounds COVID-19 sort of is making our job more difficult this year. So because of the complexity of running meetings by Zoom, the following procedure will be followed. We'll take all the items up in the order they appear on the worksheet, which is the order that they were received. I will read the item, and then I will read the comments received from councilors. I will then open discussion among the 3 committee members. I will then ask if the staff has any comments. I will then ask for comments from other councilors who may be in attendance. I will then ask for comments from members of the public who are in attendance. Then we will return to the 3 members of the committee and we will make a recommendation how to proceed on that item, followed by a roll call vote. I do want to point out this is a working session, not a public hearing. We have an 11-page document worksheet that we need to get through tonight. So our goal is to get through first pass all the way through that tonight. So I'm asking everyone to keep their comments brief and on point. And if anybody wants to speak, please use the raise your hand button so I can see you, and please be brief and stay on point. And if any members of the public who are speaking, please state your name and address. And please, I'm asking everyone tonight to stay on point and on topic, because it's going to be a little difficult sort of just negotiating this. I do want to point out that we've received 25 emails from residents with the Sunrise Movement or related groups. And there was containing a list, more or less, depending on the email, of 12 requests. The committee has taken that, and those of you who have emailed me, I've sent you a response. We will, after we go through the entire worksheet, we will take the content of that email up and develop a specific reply to be sent at the conclusion. We probably will not get to that until next Monday's meeting. I do want to also say, in the past, because I have the spreadsheet, that even though Councilor Donato is the secretary, I usually keep a running tab of what we talk about and enter it into the worksheet, which then I'll send a draft out for the next meeting so everyone could review. So that's sort of the ground rules of how we're going to run the meeting. And if we are ready, we can, do any of my fellow committee members want to weigh in on that?
Very well stated. Thank you.
Okay, very good. Caroline, I see you had your hand up.
Yeah, it's just more of a technical question. So normally when we're in person, you usually have things that you hand out to people, but obviously you can't do that here. So I'm just wondering how we're going to communicate effectively with all the people who are looking on who don't have, is there an attachment? Is there an attachment that I didn't notice in the agenda?
No, so certainly they can, at the beginning, they can follow along through the existing budget party guidelines, from the website. I'm going to have to, I may be able, it depends. I might try to share. What happens, I start getting too many windows open. But I'll see if I can maybe share my screen when we get to that point. The problem is if I share the screen, then I sort of lose the ability to see who's got their hand up and stuff, because it makes it a little more complicated. But I will read it out, so people can listen to it, and so that was how sort of was going to do that. So and again, I didn't, I spent all weekend putting these comments together, so there really was no way to kind of get it out ahead of time. Okay, so I guess let's get started.
Mr. Chair?
Did somebody say something or?
Yeah, John Gannon.
Oh, sorry, John. Yeah, just could you use your raise your hand feature? Because I can't, there's too many people on the screen. I can't see everybody. So sure, John.
A lot of people are involved in the meeting, but
Yeah,
I did want to clarify where folks at home and us can find your master list.
I just answered it, that they can look at previous year's guidelines from the website,
right?
But I don't have all the comments from the counselors on this worksheet, unless people want me to see if I can try to share it. Let me see if I can, but if I do that, I may bear with me one moment. If I could find it. Can people see that?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, hold on a second. Let me just see if I can get, now I can't see who's got their hand up. Okay. Okay, so people can see that. Is that?
Yep, we can see that.
Right now, where is the raise hand?
See, this is the problem. I lost sort of the raise hand.
No, if you put your cursor down below the black thing, you see it, participants, click on participants, you'll see raise hand then.
Yep.
No. Oh, all right. A screen comes up.
Yeah, okay, I got a separate window for raise hand. Okay.
Yep. And then on the bottom of that is the raise your hand option.
All right.
All right, so Angie, I see your hand up. Okay, good.
Right.
All right, so all right. So bear with me. All right, so everybody, can everybody see that right there?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. All right, so let's get started. So the first thing is, at the very top, we did get a note from Councilor Woodland, who said that he had no edits this year. And then the second one, I got a general comment from President Sierras that said his only comments on the budget priorities are that we do not add anything additional at this time, given the uncertainties related to COVID-19. Okay, so these are, and again, just so the audience knows, the intent that we're developing these budget policy guidelines as to the manager to develop the budgetary, the town budget, the operating budget for fiscal year 2022. The first section, number one, is cost saving and revenues. Number one is continue to proceed. The existing guideline is 1A, continue to proceed with the guidelines of the strategic framework for economic development with a long-term goal to promote a diversified and growing tax base. We had one comment from Councilor Feltner saying there should be some recognition of the costs identified with a growing tax base. So, so I'd like to open up to committee discussion. My sense is that we keep it as is. Councilor Canellis, do you have any comments?
I concur. I don't feel that there's any need to change the presentation as written.
Okay, Councilor Donato?
Is Councilor Feltner on the Zoom call? I guess I'm just a little bit confused as to what exactly she'd be looking to change on the guideline.
I think, I'm not sure. It seemed to be more of a comment than anything else, but.
Yeah, then I mean, I would be in favor of keeping
Okay.
1A as is.
Mr. Manager, do you have any comments?
No, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. Any council members, councilors want to weigh in? Seeing none, do any members of the public want to weigh in on this item? Seeing none, I'll return it back to the committee. So I guess the recommendation would be to keep it as is with no changes. Councilor Canellis, do you agree?
Yes, I do.
Councilor Donato? Do you agree?
Yes.
And I agree also. Okay. So very good. Let's go on to number two. Well, it's number 1B. And it says currently continue pursuing mitigation monies and or other measures for larger scale projects. There was one comment from Councilor Feltner. It says change to continue pursuing mitigation monies and other measures from redevelopment new projects. Doesn't sort of just a rewording of it, but so that's what we have in front of us. Let's open it for discussion among the committee members. I think I'm happy keeping it as is. It's been that way for several years. Councilor Canellis, do you have any
As
comment?
am I. I feel that there's no reason to change the wording.
Okay, how about Councilor Donato? Any questions? Or-
I agree. I think the current language is broad enough to encompass the changes that
Okay, thank you.
Councilor Feltner is suggesting. So I think we should just keep it as.
Thank you. Thank you. So Mr. Manager, did you have any comments?
No, Mr. Chairman, but that'll be a roll call vote anyways, right?
Yeah, we're going to take, yeah, we're going to, and then I want to see if any counselors want to speak on this. Seeing none, I see from this, I get comments from the public. I see Elodia Thomas. Do you want to state your name and address and your comments?
Sure, Elodia Thomas at 67 Marion Road. This has been on the budget for a long, long time. I, as a resident, would like more clarification of how the town is pursuing this with regard to large projects. I did some research on this now. It's like 5 years ago. Many communities have a formula for doing this, given the pressure of development in the Metro Boston area. And I feel it's a statement, but I have no knowledge of how the town pursues this and what their structure is. And I think this is going to be an important issue for people to have more clarification on. Thank you, Vinnie.
Okay. Anybody else from the public? Okay. Okay, I just want to double check that there's nobody else there. All right, so I guess going back to the committee, so just to sort of answer that, so mitigation for large projects is typically works through negotiation with the developers through the special permit granting process. So let's go back to the committee. So the recommendation would be to leave it as is. So Councilor Canellis,
Yes.
Councilor Donato,
Yes.
and myself is yes. Okay, very good. Going on to the next item, which is 1C. Consider filing additional applications to all applicable federal and Commonwealth programs and grants, including but not limited to the Commonwealth's Community Compact Program, the Municipal Vulnerability Preparedness Program, the Green Communities Program, the Housing Choice Program, and the Community Oriented Policing Services Grant. We got one comment from Councilor Feltner, which basically just slightly reworded it to consider filing additional applications to and following through on all federal and Commonwealth programs and grants, including but not limited to the Commonwealth's Community Compact Program, Municipal Vulnerability Preparedness, Green Communities, Housing Choice, and the Community Oriented Policing Service Program. So it's just a slight rewording of the existing thing. Let's open it up to discussion. I'm happy with the way it's currently written from the past years. Councilor Canellis, do you have any?
This item was thoroughly vetted last year, and we made any applicable changes, and I feel comfortable with the wording as presented.
Okay. Councilor Donato.
I agree with Councilor Canellis. I know we spent some time on this guideline last year and we updated the language, and I'm comfortable.
Okay. Mr. Manager, do you have any comments?
No, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. Any counselors like to speak? Please raise your hand. Okay, seeing none. Any member of the public want to speak? Please raise your hand. Okay, seeing none. Let's go back to the committee. All right, so the action is to agree to keep it as is. Councilor Canellis,
I do.
Councilor Donato,
Yes.
and myself is a yes. Okay, very good. The next item is scroll down to through page 1 of 11, so making some progress. This one is actively seek payments in lieu of taxes, pilot agreements with each nonprofit organization owning or purchasing property in Watertown. We received no comments on this. So I think the action would be taken for discussion to the committee to leave it as is. Councilor Canellis, do you have any comments?
I do not.
Councilor Donato?
No comment.
Okay, does any counselor want to speak? Sorry, Mr. Manager, do you have any comments?
No, sir.
Any counselors like to speak to this one? Okay, seeing none. Is any member of the public?
Mr. Chair?
Oh, sorry, John. Yeah, you got to use the raise. I can't see you. You got to use your raise the hand button. Sorry, go ahead, John.
Okay. So with regard to the payment in lieu of taxes, we had a tax positive situation with Tufts Health Plans selling the building to a for-profit property owner. So they did have a payment of lieu in taxes with the town. So maybe someone can explain to me what the difference in the payment in lieu of taxes would be compared to the budget, the taxes paid under full taxation? Maybe the manager?
Yeah. So we can do it. Just so you know, under state law. So when a nonprofit organization sells their tax exempt property to a for-profit company, the properties against the assessed value of the taxes against the assessed value of the property show up as new growth in the following year. And also the payment in lieu of taxes disappears. So what we'll see on the budget is that we'll see an increase in new growth on the property tax, but then under the other income sources, the payment in lieu of tax will go down. It will go down a lot. It was shown in the preliminary budget overview going down a lot because Tufts was our single biggest.
Well, I'm just asking what the difference between the net between the total taxes gained from the sale relative to the loss from the payment in lieu of tax agreement. So
Yeah.
That was presented by the town manager during his presentation. I don't have the
it was, but
material in
I'd
front of
like
me.
to know that information now. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So it's,
If anyone can provide.
yeah. This process really isn't to sort of dig into the specific. It's more sort of a, we want to. I mean, certainly that was in the preliminary budget overview, but this
But
is just.
it does help me.
If you'd like, I can go
Sure.
upstairs.
Well, it does
and get the
help me.
document.
Think about
Mr. Chairman, I can speak to it.
Sure. That'd be great, Mr. Driscoll.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, to Councilor Gannon's query, without having it right in front of me, I would say that for fiscal year 21, if Tufts was, and these are rough numbers, I don't have the overview right in front of me, but on or about $900,000 was the payment for a whole fiscal year for Tufts Health Plan. For fiscal year 2022, obviously the Tufts pilot payment in lieu of taxes will go away. And the Spears Capital, the new growth is somewhere related to, just for fiscal year 2022, for that property is 3 times that amount of money. So instead of 900, it would be in the 2.7 million range to $3 million. On that particular transaction, if you will, I wouldn't respectfully say that would, that's just the size of the property, et cetera. But in essence, it's about $900,000 in fiscal 21, and the real estate or new growth related to that property, based on the chairman of the Board of Assessors, is that the new growth will be about 3 times that amount of money.
It's about 3 times. Okay, John, does that answer your question?
Thank you. And a follow up to that question.
Sure.
It does. And I had a follow up based upon that. So seeking agreements with each nonprofit, obviously there are very small nonprofits and there are very large nonprofits. What would the seeking of pilots, would it be all pilot, would all nonprofits or certain ones of them? I'm trying to just, as a first time council, I'm trying to get a sense of what the town does presently, and do they seek pilots from each nonprofit or certain ones?
Mr. Manager, maybe you could answer that question.
Yeah. Again, Mr. Chairman, I think this let me, and I wanted to say something on the budget policy guideline itself, as the Committee on Budget Fiscal Oversight has discussed this many times. It's very I would respectfully ask favorable consideration of the goal because it's helpful that the chairman of the Board of Assessors and the other Board of Assessors members can point to that when there's new properties coming in and buying a bigger property. I wouldn't get into, we have certainly not pursuing religious entities, if you will, but it's what we're really looking for is having it for a larger nonprofit, if you will, but it's really kind of predicated on trying to reach out to all nonprofits, but certainly as Council Picciarelli alluded to,
Didn't it start at 7?
most of the others are not, very small dollar amounts within the size of our overall budget, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Okay,
And
John,
through you to the chair, I want to, that provides enough information for me, so I thank the town manager for providing that background.
Yeah, thank you, John. All right, any other councilors have questions? If not, I'll turn it over to public. I see Elodia Thomas has her hand up. Go ahead, Elodia.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd just like to know if is there a list of all the nonprofits in town and what their payment would be in lieu of taxes? That's my first question. 2, is there some kind of set formula that the town uses to discuss this with nonprofits? It's the same issue that I'm kind of talking about in terms of linkage fees or mitigation fees. Many communities base it on a square foot in terms of mitigation or linkage fees. With regard to the nonprofits, do we have tiers for our nonprofits? And is that calculated in some way that is both fair to the nonprofit, but also fair for the services they utilize in our community? I'm not expecting you to answer this now, but again, I think this is an important point of information as we talk about how Watertown is being run and what's going on, with no reflection on any individual in the community, but public information. Thank you.
Okay, so all I will say is that it's complicated and unique for each property. So, all right, so let's move back to the committee. So I guess the decision would be to keep it as is. Councilor Pinellas, you
Yes,
agree?
I do.
Councilor Donato?
Yes.
Okay, and myself also is yes. Very good. All right, let's move on to 1E. And 1E, this was added about 3 years ago. Upgrade the town's parking payment technology and adjust parking meter rates as outlined in the Watertown Parking Management Plan to offset costs as allowed under General Law, Chapter 40, Section 22C. We received one comment from Councilor Feltner that says change to review and raise parking meter rates and payment technology to offset costs as allowed under General Law, Chapter 40, Section 22C, and in support of our parking management plan. So basically just sort of flipping the words around. Councilor Donato suggested it be deleted. Let's take this up for discussion within the committee. So I just want to point out that the Joint Public Works and Economic Development and Planning Committee reviewed the parking management plan and the implementation plan for those 10 items and presented a report to the town council on October 27, 2020, basically moving forward with going in front of the Traffic Commission seeking to raise the rates as well as appropriating money for the new payment parking technology. So I do believe that this action item is now complete. I will ask so Councilor Pinellas, do you have any comments?
Councilor Donato indicated that this item should be deleted, and I concur.
Okay. And Councilor Donato, I assume you still agree with your...
Yes, so especially in light of your comments that you just made for everybody attending the meeting tonight, I think it's justification to remove this.
Okay, good. Mr. Manager, did you have any comments?
No, sir.
Okay, thank you. Any counselors have any comments? Counselor Feltner.
Thank you, Chair Piccirilli. Yeah, I just left it in here because the votes had not gone through yet on this at the time that we submitted this. And I guess the only question I had was I was wondering, it's not covered specifically under the guideline, but about the rest of the meters in town. But yeah, the vote has since been taken on this issue, so I understand that.
Okay, great, thank you. Okay, any members of the public want to speak? Elodie, I see you have your hand up. Is that new or is that still up from the last time?
Sorry, Vinny, I apologize. I forgot to take it down.
That's okay, no problem. Anybody else from the public want to comment? Okay, seeing none, let's go back to the committee. So the action would be agree to remove it. Remove this item. So Councilor Kunelis, do you agree?
Yes, I do.
Councilor Donato?
Yes.
And I also agree. So that's done. Okay, now we're going to move down to some new items that were submitted. We had 5 new items submitted as revenue tasks. So Councilor Palumbo submitted one, and just so the public knows, these are submitted in the order that I received them from councilors. He stated, explore a home rule petition for a 1.5% seller's fee for real estate transfers over $2.5 million with certain exceptions, including but not limited to seniors and government property. The funds from this revenue source would be used to increase affordable housing in Watertown. So for discussion among the committee members. So I just want to point out that this matter is currently before the Committee on Human Services to develop affordable housing policy guidance for the town council to approve. Also, a home rule petition requires legislative action and cannot be done by the executive branch as part of the budget process. So I just wanted to sort of put this in context. So it would seem to me that this really does not belong as a budget priority guideline for the operating budget. Councilor Kunelis, do you have any comments?
No, with the clarification that you've supplied, I would not support this.
Councilor Donato?
I agree. I think where it has not, the full council has not weighed in on the suggestions from Human Services, I do not think we should add this request.
Mr. Manager, do you have any comments?
No, sir.
Okay, then I'm going to ask for councilors. I see Councilor Bays.
Yeah, I thought this was to explore, of course, I can't see the thing, to explore new ways of getting revenue. And it seems like this is exactly what this is looking for new ways of getting revenue. Does it necessarily say that you're going to do it, or I thought this was just exploring it?
So the budget priority guidelines are instructions to the manager about what to put in the operating budget for next year. So it's not, so exploratory things that can be done through committees with policy guidance. So currently the Human Service Committee is exploring this, and the Human Service Committee is supposed to be coming back to the council with a affordable housing plan with a bunch of action items, which I believe this would be one of them. But,
right.
But we can't ask the town manager to put this in the operating budget because he can't.
But can you put it as if the Human Services Committee comes back with this as a budget priority? Like, so in other words, not say definitely do this, but should the Human Services Committee or should the town council vote on this in this budget year? Can you before the budget year, can you look at this priority?
It's still, the action item would not be for the manager to put this in the operating budget, because the action item would be for the town council to submit a home rule petition to raise a new tax.
Right, right.
And it would never, this would never even go through the operating budget. It would
Okay, I get that.
Separate, it would be a completely separate thing, which is why I don't disagree with it.
No, I know. I understand that you're not saying that because you disagree with it. I understand you're saying because of the way, I was just wondering if there was a way to phrase it so that it would make sense.
I just think because, ultimately no, because it's not an instruction to the manager to put in the operating budget. So
Okay.
That's the problem. So I think, we'll wait for the Human Service Committee report to with the recommendation, and the council can vote on that and how to proceed. Okay. Council Woodland, I see you have your hand up.
Yeah, it's something you mentioned, but is worth repeating, that what this language does is establish a special fund. And as you mentioned, it wouldn't be part of the operating budget. It seems like any revenue received here would be dedicated to that special fund for that purpose. So the municipal finance angle of this is that it wouldn't be part of the operating budget. So that's the first thing. The second thing is probably worth mentioning too, is that this issue was never specifically referred to the Human Services Committee. This is something that was brought up as part of the increase affordable housing broad scope that the committee's taken. The third thing that's probably worth mentioning as well is that towns have sought similar treatment to specific taxes on transfers before. I'm not sure the legislature's actually signed any of them. There is a substantial legal issue related to the Emerson case. So there's multi-prongs here. One, where I don't think this was ever specifically referred. The council hasn't approved it. Even if we did and it was, I don't think the legislature would sign it. Even if they did, I think there's a legal issue with it. And assuming all those things didn't come to fruition, it wouldn't be part of the operating budget anyway. So I see this, it's like 5 tiers into why this shouldn't be included.
Okay, thank you, Councilor Woodland. All right.
Wait.
Caroline, did you want to?
Well,
okay.
Yeah, I just think I need to clarify something. So I've been talking to a couple of legislators about the home rule petitions that are currently in there. And I did not get the sense there has been a legal issue raised, but it did not sound like it was something that was stopping these petitions from going through, the home rule petitions, because right now Boston, Somerville, I think Brookline, Concord, and Nantucket have one, and they are dead. And the reason they haven't gone through right now is because of the I just want to make this clear. The reason they haven't gone through right now is because of the pandemic, because I want to make sure that this doesn't impact whether or not we do one. So I just wanted to respond to what Councilor Woodland said.
Okay, good. Thanks. All right. So let me just say, so anybody from the public like to speak to this?
Vinny, there is a comment in the chat from one of the residents. I think.
The chat. Okay, I can't, when I'm sharing my screen, I can't see the chat. So hold on a second.
If you like, I can read it.
Yeah, if you could do that for me.
Maddie Rockland commented, are there any items that are designed to create greater revenue that could fund an increase in affordable housing in Watertown? She was trying to raise her hand on Zoom, but wasn't able.
That is, the operating budget, per se, doesn't, so there's 2 ways that just take a step back. Affordable housing, there's 2 ways that we provide affordable housing. One is through the Watertown Housing Authority, which is an independent authority that owns properties. The other way is through the inclusionary zoning. And the inclusionary zoning is how which is currently 15%, which is how we require private developers to provide affordable housing units. Those are sort of the 2 ways. We don't actually have a way at this point to build specific affordable housing. I will say that there is a referral from the Human Services Committee since 2018 to explore ways to increase affordable housing. And that's, we're looking at a variety of things, but there's nothing at this point.
Mr. Chair?
CPA.
Sure, and I'm going to recognize Steve Magoon real quick if he wants to talk to that point.
Thank you, Counselor. I just wanted to add a couple things to that. One is the CPA, which does dedicate a minimum of 10% of its revenue towards affordable housing. And then also we're participants in the Home Consortium, which is a way that we access HUD funding for creation and preservation of affordable housing. And we do have a couple of existing revenue sources, not revenue sources, accounts that have funds dedicated to affordable housing. So just a couple things to add to that. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And then,
Maddie had a follow-up question.
sure, what's the follow-up question? I just, if I could if I could just hold on just one second. We're getting when I asked everyone to stand,
Mr. Chair?
we're going to the point under discussion. We've kind of strayed, I think, from the question about a transfer tax. We're getting into a much broader discussion. I know that people have put that housing in one of the questions that came from the Sunrise Movement, but we will take that up next meeting and go through that in more detail. But I do, I know Councilor Gannon had his hand up, and if you want to just read Maddie's follow-up question, but we really do need to move on to the next one.
So I'm back on, I had
Here,
some
John.
connection issues, but I just wanted to point out that the Committee on Human Services is looking at recommending the town adopt an affordable housing 44, Section 55C. That adopting that fund would allow the town to contribute monies from the operating budget for this. Just another option.
Thanks, John. And did who could, Anthony, could you just read the follow-up question from Maddie?
I can read it. I didn't want to interrupt, and I wasn't sure how to raise my hand on Zoom.
Okay, so
Technologically challenged.
sure. Well, just real quick.
I kind of answered my question. I was wondering if I know the bottom line of item number 1 was to create to fund a revenue source that would be used for affordable housing in Watertown. So if that item wasn't going to be adopted, I was wondering if it was possible to create a line item in this budget that would open a specific fund to be used for affordable housing. But it sounds like that's already underway in various forms.
Yes, it's still, yes, and we are anxiously awaiting the Human Service Committee's final report, which should be raised in sometime in the next couple of months, early next year, I'm hoping. So there's a lot going on with that. All right, thank you, everyone. Some good discussion there. So I do want to go back to the committee. So the feeling was that do not add this item. So Councilor Pinellas, do you agree?
I agree.
Councilor Donato, do you agree?
I agree to not add this.
And I agree also. Okay, great. The next item, the next new item number, let's see. So number 2 was from Councilor Feltner. It said move forward with developing the Watertown Climate Energy Master Plan, supporting operations and transitions to 100% renewable energy. Note this falls under both 1 and 2. This came up last year, and we made it very clear that this is an expenditure item, not a revenue item. It already is an expenditure item, an existing item 2G. So that's what this is. So if we can open up to some discussion, I think, as we agreed last year, that this should not be added in as a revenue source. Councilor Pinellas, do you have any comments?
No further comments.
Councilor Donato, do you have any comments?
No further comments. I would be in support of not.
Okay. And any councilors want to weigh in on this? Councilor Feltner, did Councilor Feltner sign in?
I said, sorry, it's very slow trying to click the mute and raise hand, so I just unmuted myself.
Okay.
Yeah, no, I just left it in here again. I just feel like whether it's the planning department, climate energy, some others, that I wish that we would recognize savings and potential benefits from some of these programs and not see it just as an expenditure. So I understand the philosophy of our budgeting and how we approach the guidelines, but that's why I left it in here. Thank you.
Seems that Counselor Picciarelli's frozen.
Yeah, that's what it looks like to me.
Yeah, I think we lost Counselor Picciarelli.
He had to get off and get back. Who's probably going to come back on? But who's the host?
Cable access.
Cable access.
Do we ever, I don't know if Steve Magoon might be able to generate, you know, like with home programs or neighborhood solar where you actually generate more than you're using on the town side with all the energy savings programs we're doing?
You mean a program that would generate revenue from creating excess energy?
Well, I guess, you know, it's more in terms of savings perhaps than actual revenue, but
Yeah, I was going to say, because we certainly would have the ability to save money on our energy bills. And we've looked at that several times and continue to look at that. You know, most recently, we're going to take advantage of an Eversource grant to install vehicle charging stations at a couple different locations in town. You know, we take advantage of the savings with the solar panels installations that we have on the high school and DPW, and we're going to add several, obviously, with the elementary school projects, and I'm sure we'll be part of the high school project as well. So I think we take advantage of those as best we can.
All right.
that's great. I think it's just helpful for the public to be aware of. Maybe it's something council could consider to have separate report that's not obviously part of the budget meeting. Hi, Vinny. I'm muting myself back.
Sorry, my internet dropped out and I just, so I missed that. So we're still on new item number 2. So we're still talking about the climate energy?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, so just hold on a second. Now my screen's all messed up.
You were about to bring it back to committee to vote.
Bring it back to committee to vote. Sorry. Okay. So sorry for that pause, but this is like the challenges of using Zoom. So, all right. So coming back to the
I had
committee.
raised my hand.
Oh, sorry, Carolyn. Go ahead.
So when you were gone, so Lisa, Councilor Feltner was talking to Mr. Magoon about how where there would be savings. So my question, I'm just curious, like, why wouldn't it fall under both spendings and savings if there are going to be ways to recap some of the money? Like if there are going to be savings.
So let's take a step back. So developing the plan is going to cost money, right? That's an expenditure. We already did. Number one, once we develop the plan, then we'll sort of know where we're going to have to spend money, where we're going to save money. But I would say we're going to have to wait until see what the action items of the plans are. If the plan says you do X and we're going to save $100,000 a year if we do X, well, then that becomes a cost saving item. But at this point, we haven't developed the plan. The action plan is going to tell us what we need to do. So I think it's premature to say, but moving forward, developing the plan is actually costing us money.
Okay.
Just so everyone's clear. So
I just wanted to figure it out, exactly what you're saying here.
Yeah, it is. And, ultimately, the goal, and energy is a complicated thing, but, sometimes you spend money to save money. So we need to figure that out. But we have to develop the plan first to decide what we're going to go. So anyway, but I do appreciate, appreciate it, but I think it's just a little on the premature side.
Vinny, Maddie Rockland.
Sure. Okay, I see her hand up. Okay, go ahead, Maddie.
Hi,
Maddie,
sorry.
could you just give us your address?
100 Robbins Road
Okay. Okay,
in
go ahead.
Watertown. Yeah, I guess my question is just, I understand that this is an expenditure rather than a budget item first, because the plan, because it costs money to develop, has to be an expenditure. However, this budget item doesn't specify any clear date that it has to be done by. It doesn't specify any budget costs associated with anything other than moving forward. So it sounds like we'd have to develop the plan under the expenditures first, but then wait until the next budget cycle to get it in place. Wouldn't it make more sense to just pass this now, have that infrastructure set up in place for when the expenditure item is passed, so that once a plan is developed, you have the support on the budget to move forward with developing that plan, which is what this item says?
So just a couple of things. So when we get to item 2G, we'll talk a little bit about the plan, because that's where it currently is. The problem is, we haven't developed a plan yet. So to tell the manager in next year's budget, put in cost savings of X dollars on electricity, remember, this is instruction to the manager about what to put in the budget. So if we haven't developed a plan to decide what to do yet, how do we tell the manager what to put in the budget? And that's, sort of the chicken and the egg thing. So at this point, we need to develop a plan and vote on what we're going to move forward to with a plan. And then we could say, at that point, move forward with X implementation, which will save us $100,000 a year or $500,000 a year or something. But at this point, we don't know because we haven't developed a plan. So, and this is where we are. So,
Vinny, I think maybe to Maddie's question, also at the last council meeting, as part of the budget amendment, we are allocating funds to fund moving forward with the implementation, or the production of this plan. So I don't know if that maybe answers part of.
Yeah, that's helpful. Thank you.
Yeah, so just so Maddie, when we get to 2G, if you could just hang on to that, there'll be a little bit more discussion when we get down at that point. Okay, so let's go ahead with.
Vinny, I have my hand up.
Oh, go ahead. Okay, go ahead,
Thank
Angie.
you.
Sorry, good, Councilor.
Just to follow up on Councilor Donato, at the last council meeting, we appropriated $102,175 $100 for the climate and energy master plan.
Right. Okay. So let's bring it back. So the action item would be not to add this.
Correct.
So Councilor Canellis, do you agree?
I agree.
Councilor Donato, do you agree?
I agree.
Okay, and I agree also. Okay, moving on to the new number 3. Councilor Feltner submitted continued support in pursuit of combined and shared resources with our school department, including information technology services. So I will just, as we open up for discussion, I will point out that this is already in the ongoing budget policy guidelines resolution 2012-72, item 2G, and that is, as you know, attached by reference every year to the budget priority guidelines. So it already is in there. So I don't think we need to add it separately because it will be duplicating what's already in the attachment. Councilor Canellis, do you have any questions?
Nothing further.
Mr. Chair,
Yeah, who's that?
John Gannon.
Sure, just, let me just, if you just hold on, let me just go see if Counselor Donato has any comments.
No comment.
Okay. Let me go down and ask, before I recognize Counselor Gannon, Mr. Manager, did you have any comments?
No, sir.
Okay, now, go ahead, John.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So in order to even pursue any combined administrative services between the school department and the town side, the town would have had to adopt a statute under General Laws, Chapter 71, that has to be approved by both the school committee and the town council. So I wonder, when I was town attorney up to the middle 1990s, the town had not adopted such a statute. But I wonder if the town has done so, which would be great if it did, because it would allow facilitation of shared economies between the school department and the town on non-educational initiatives like computers and what have you. So that would be my question before we can even pursue Council Feltner's suggestion. So I would maybe a request for information whether the town had adopted that statute under Chapter 71.
Really briefly, I'm going to ask the managers just to explain that, because we already are sharing information technology services as well as the building maintenance by creation of the public building department. So, Mr. Manager, did you want to speak additionally to that?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman, and Councilor Gannon's query. Yes, we did adopt to create a public facilities department, and it was under the general laws, Chapter 71, but that was approved, if you will, by the Honorable School Committee and the Honorable Town Council, which allowed us to establish the public facilities. Certainly there has been some, and I do know that was under general laws, Chapter 71. Now, I'm not sure that if there's, but it wasn't specifically, it was just the creation of the Public Facilities Department. You know, clearly as we're moving forward, I think what Councilor Picciarelli alluded to is item 2G of the ongoing budget policy guidelines reads, explore cost savings by sharing personnel across town departments, work towards merging or combining the following functions to better serve both the town and school department, facilities management, which in fact we've already done, human resources, finance, and informational technology. So if there is another section of Chapter 71, and as we move forward with looking at the various recommendations in the IT assessment and with the new chief information officer on board, if there is a further general law that we need to adopt by both school committee and town council, we would bring that back, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and through to the town manager.
Okay, thank you. Councilor Feltner, I see you have your hand up.
Thank you. Yeah, I thought that this went off the list as already completed, and I wanted to be sure that even though we have our director of public buildings, there are a lot of IT services that have not been consolidated or shared, and so I wanted to be sure this stayed on the list too, because I think there are more savings that can be realized. So that's why I put it on my submission. Thank you.
Great, yeah, which is a great point. But it's already covered, so it's already on the attached list, you know, with the sort of the ones that don't change from year to year. So,
good.
Okay, anybody from the public want to weigh in on this? Just raise your hand. Okay, not seeing it. In John's iPad, John Gannon, is that yours? Or is that somebody else?
Yes, I'll have to take it down. It was,
Okay, no, I just want to make sure that there
Sorry.
wasn't somebody else that I was missing.
Sure.
Okay. All right, so let's come back to the committee. So the recommendation would be to not add this. Councilor Cornelis.
I agree.
Councilor Donato.
I agree.
And I agree also. Okay, very good. So let's moving on to new item number 4. Again, from Councilor Feltner. Consider implementing a tax assessment on large projects in support of continued work to strengthen the Watertown Transportation Management Association for a public shuttle bus program. So we've sort of discussed this in the past, and it was my understanding that imposing a new tax would require a legislative action. We actually would need to do some research into what that actually would be allowed. I would point out, like the transfer tax, this cannot be done by the executive branch as part of the budget process. So that's sort of, I think, where we are with that. Councilor Canellis, do you have any comments on this one?
I do not, and developers actually do join into the TMA as members.
Yes. Councilor Donato, do you have any comments on this?
I'm sorry, I'm toggling back and forth between documents. I was trying to find the comments. I think this kind of is, similar to, I think, a request I had suggested last year was with regard to a linkage ordinance. And I think at the time, Steve Magoon had informed us that there was no general law that allowed such linkage ordinances. So I don't know if this is kind of a, analogous to a linkage ordinance, if that's what Council Feltner was hinting at. And if so, I think, based on comments from Steve Magoon in the past, I don't think we can add.
Right. Mr. Manager, did you want to make any comments?
No, sir.
Okay. Okay. Let's go to comments from councilors. See, Councilor Woodland has his hand up. Kenny?
Thank you. It's probably just worth mentioning that the Economic Development and Planning Committee will be discussing the funding of the pilot program for the Pleasant Street shuttle. So we're looking at the funding for that piece early next month. So I know that the goal here would be to increase funding and get that program off the ground. And then the other piece to note here is it's the same as what we talked about for the 1.5 transfer fee. It's a similar legal issue under the Emerson case. But you're both right that there's no municipal finance statute right now that would permit an assessment of this sort for this purpose.
Okay. Thank you, Kenny. Any other councilors? Any members of the public like to speak to this?
Sorry, my
Lisa?
buttons are, my buttons are slow. Again, yes, I know that I was hoping we could revisit this, and if we're going to narrow this just extra instructions to the town manager, maybe we can talk about this again at committee. And I know there's more discussion to be had around the TMA and the shuttle bus. So keeping it on the burner, I guess, but to your points, perhaps this isn't the correct approach.
Right, thank you. I appreciate that. And, certainly at the Economic Development Planning Committee, we are continuing to discuss additional revenue sources. So, that's, I think, really where this discussion belongs about what we can do with finding more money for the shuttle bus. Okay, so let's bring it back to the committee for recommendation. So the recommendation would be not to add this as an item. Councilor Canellis?
I agree.
Councilor Donato, do you agree?
I agree.
Okay, and I agree also. Okay, thank you. And then new number 5, also by Councilor Feltner. It says, consider the use of free cash and other one-time revenue sources and reserves before enacting furloughs and layoffs as needed. This is preferable to drawing from stabilization and other post-employment benefit funds. I will just say, like I said earlier, before we started the review, there is too much uncertainty on the impacts of COVID-19 on the town's budget, in my mind, to determine if this is the appropriate approach. And the strategies for developing future budgets remain fluid. I would be, this is going to be, depending on what happens with the budget, depending on what happens with our own local revenues, depending on what happens with state aid, any number of things could happen. We may need to cut costs, we may not need to cut costs. Generally speaking, use of free cash and one-time revenues is for recurring expenditures like salaries is really not good financial practice because what do you do in year two? So, you know, if you go back to the 2008 financial crisis, we made some hard choices. You know, we asked every bargaining unit to go without a raise for 2 years. We did not fill positions that were vacated through attrition. You know, we made a lot of choices that didn't involve laying people off, and we were able to get through that. So I think this certainly, as the manager works on developing the budget for next year, we're going to have a lot of discussion about this as a strategy with the council. But I think this is just I think is not, personally, I don't think this is the appropriate approach to put this in a budget party guideline. So that's my feeling. Councilor Canellis, do you have any comments?
I certainly agree. I mean, there are so many issues to review if in fact we were to be in that particular situation. And those of us who have been through it before realize and understand all of the extenuating circumstances and factors. So I would not commit ourselves or even discuss free cash as an option at this point.
Councilor Donato, any questions?
I think I would agree with Councilor Canellis in the comments you made. I think the administration has shown its commitment to the town workforce, the way that they handled the first part of the pandemic. And I would imagine that the manager and the rest of the administration do the same in the future, but I don't think we can limit our options right now because the budget situation is really so uncertain.
Okay. Thank you. Mr. Manager, did you have any comments?
Mr. Chairman, just that is what you said at the beginning of the conversation, that like the beginning of the meeting about COVID-19 is, which kind of concurred with my statement back on October 13, that the key word here is uncertainty, not only for the remainder of fiscal year 2021, but also for the development of the fiscal year 2022 budget. I would say that the one of the strategies we used in submitting the budget to council in the beginning of June instead of the middle of April was that we did use extra free cash to avoid, if you will, one of the strategies to avoid layoffs. The one thing we did with the budget amendment that council approved last Tuesday night was that we were going to set aside the extra money. We actually asked council appropriated an extra $1,250,000. That being said, it's a very slippery slope. We had indicated to the rating agencies we would do that one time. I think by putting the money aside, we can kind of keep our options open for a variety of issues to, I think ultimately town council and the administration are looking to provide the highest level of services to the citizens. So certainly want to keep all the options open, but when we've utilized free cash in the past, it's been either $1,750,000 or $2 million with the understanding that the revenues over or the expenditures under would always restore those monies. So that's a slippery slope. the norm. We'd prefer not to have a revenue sources utilization of free cash. We've done it for, quite for many years now, but knowing that we can replenish it, but we would certainly want to keep all our options open. But it's really, at this point, really uncertain how we're going to proceed with the rest of fiscal 21 and also with the development of fiscal year 2022.
Thank you, Mr. Driscoll. All right, so any comments from councilors? I see Kenny had his hand up first, then Lisa.
Thank you. I just wanted to note, just for the folks listening and watching in, that we wouldn't most likely be able to draw from any stabilization funds anyway. Usually those funds are restricted to specific purposes under Chapter 40, Section 5. And we definitely wouldn't be able to draw from the OPEB trust fund under 32B20, which really delineates and specifically explains what those funds can be used for. So in either case, we wouldn't be able to draw from those monies regardless.
Great, thank you for that clarification. Councilor Feltner?
Thank you, Chair Piccirilli. Yes, I understand the slippery slope, which is why I said, as needed and consider. And to the town manager's point, I thoroughly understand that we are really unknown territory, uncharted waters perhaps coming up. But this has been used before, and in other communities that are not as in good shape as Watertown are looking at doing things like this. So it's more, I was trying to be unusually thinking forward in worst case scenarios of just having on record that this could be a potential path, and kind of in support of what the administration did this year in avoiding any furloughs and layoffs. So, but I concur and certainly understand what people's worries or concerns, slippery slope, or thinking that I'm intimated that we need to do this, or that it would be an easy decision. And of course, it will be complicated in the future and lots to think about. So appreciate your discussion. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And I appreciate your desire to prevent layoffs, which none of us want to see. And like I said, we managed to do it the last time with a much worse condition. So, okay, I want to open up. Anyone from the public like to speak to this issue? Okay, seeing no hands raised. So let's go back to the committee. So the recommendation would be not to add this. Councilor Canellis, do you agree?
I agree.
Councilor Donato, do you agree?
I agree.
And I agree also. Okay, very good. All right, so that moves us now into the expenditures. So starting with number, let me scroll over to here we are, program expenditures. So the first one, this is section 2. 2A is enhance the capabilities of the town manager's office with consideration given to creating a deputy town manager position as previously recommended in the Division of Local Services Financial Management Review, with responsibilities to include managing communication content and enhancing public engagement and other duties as assigned. So we had 2 comments from this one. Councilor Palumbo suggested changing that last phrase to with the primary responsibility for managing communication content and enhancing public engagement. And Councilor Feltner basically suggested deleting that entire last phrase. So, so from a discussion standpoint, I will just say that the committee spent a lot of time revising this item last year, specifically by including that last phrase, which says with the responsibility to include managing communication content and enhancing public engagement and other duties as assigned. By doing that, this actually resulted in it being ranked the #1 priority for fiscal year 21, which is pretty astounding. So I would, personally, I would like to keep it as we wrote to get it as the #1 priority. And my recommendation, even though this was, if it were not for COVID-19, this probably would have happened, but because we had to put all new hires on hold for COVID-19, this still remains an active guideline. And it would be, I would like to keep this as is. So Council Canellis, your thoughts?
We spent an inordinate amount of time last year reviewing this particular item and the exact wording of it. And I think we all had a lot of input. Right now, it's not a priority of mine to increase the staffing levels within the administration. And I would suggest on my own behalf, keeping the wording as we submitted last year.
Great, thank you. Councilor Donato?
I'm comfortable with the language as is.
Thank you. Mr. Manager, do you have any comments?
No, sir.
Okay, let's open up to councilors. Councilor Woodland had his hand up.
Thank you. I'll be brief. Just gonna keep saying what I keep saying about this topic, which is that the council never evaluated this issue. It was included without any recommendation from the council. The last council vote we have on this topic is to reject this position. And that is nothing to do with the actual content of it. If this came in front of the council, I'd probably vote to do it. But then again, we have not done that. We have not followed the prescribed process for this recommendation. And every time this comes up, I feel it necessary to say that because we didn't do it. It's going to be interesting if this was filled this year, if we did get this position, how's the manager going to fill it? There's 9 different versions right now of what each counselor wants in this deputy town manager position. We haven't given him any guidance. I mean, God bless him. Hopefully something comes forward and he's able to say, oh yeah, like I got this person and they're doing everything everybody wants, but I highly doubt that. So we keep having this in there and we haven't given instructions to what we want. So need to mention that because it did not follow the process and there will be expectations that are not met because it did not follow that process. Thank you.
Okay, Councilor Feltner?
Thank you, Chair Piccirilli. Yeah, if you all are voting to leave it in as is, that's okay with me. I was concerned that it would be taken out, that because of the hiring of the CIO, that people would say that we don't need this anymore. And I wanted to be sure that, you know, it stayed in as full-time deputy town manager position was a priority. So that's why I took out the lengthy subclauses in there, but it's fine. Personally, if it stays as is, I just want to stay, hopefully it stays in as a guideline. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any members of the public want to speak to this point? Okay, seeing none, let's go back to the committee. So the recommendation would be to keep it as is. Councilor Canellis,
I agree.
Councilor Donato,
I agree.
and I agree also. Okay, very good. Let's go on to 2B. Continue support for Building for the Future initiative in collaboration with the School Building Committee for the 3 elementary school project and for the MSBA high school project with proposed debt exclusion funding in conjunction with outreach efforts to the community by the school committee. Councilor Plumba said no change to this. Councilor Feltner suggested replacing proposed debt exclusion funding in conjunction with outreach efforts to the community by the school committee with anticipated debt exclusion funding. I will just point out for discussion purposes that the preliminary budget overview currently shows a proposed debt exclusion funding. And we have all agreed that the school committee will need to take a significant role. So I would not support rewording that last phrase. Councilor Canellis, do you have any comments?
I suggest no changes.
Okay. Councilor Donato.
I'm comfortable with the language as is.
Mr. Manager, do you have any comments?
I just did very much want the, from going to have to need to speak to the taxpayers, we need to use the adjective proposed. And certainly I wouldn't want to make any assumptions that the vote is, we need to have this proposed. And what we've said for quite some time, the administration, town council, is the school committee really needs to take the lead on this to move forward, looking for the taxpayers to vote a debt exclusion. I very much think it's a very worthwhile endeavor, but it's going to need a lot of work to inform the taxpayers of the need for the high school and request their support. Thank you.
Okay. So to the counselors now, I see Counselor Gannon has his hand up. Go ahead, John.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. So the word anticipated, it strikes me as an inappropriate word, since, as the town manager spoke, we are going to have to convince the taxpayers to vote on this extra debt exclusion. It's not something the town council votes on, but the voters themselves in a special election. So we're going to have to, it's a very needed project. We're just going to have to convince and work and outreach to every voter in Watertown that this is a very worthy project for a modest increase. So I just want to just note that this is going to require a combined effort of the business community, the school folks, the town folks, and everyone. It's something that's going to immensely benefit the town. And I just want to emphasize that we have to work in harmony together on this, and it is a vote. So we should take the vote, take this extremely seriously and make our case to the taxpayers. So with that, I just want to say thanks.
Thank you, John. Counselor Feltner.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I guess it's just semantics. I just had anticipated debt exclusion because there hasn't been a specific proposal put forward by the school committee or a special committee that would do the campaigning for the debt exclusion. But if you're telling me, so I missed that detail that it already says proposed debt exclusion, I have no problem with that. It's just really nothing has been done on it publicly. And so that's why I put anticipated in there. So, but I am fine leaving the wording the way it is.
Okay, great. Thank you. All right. Anybody from the public like to speak to this? I don't see anybody's hands raised. All right, so let's go back to the committee. So the recommendation would be to keep this as is. Councilor Canellis, do you
I
agree?
agree.
Councilor Donato, do you agree?
I agree.
And I agree also. Okay, very good. Moving on to 2C. This one is improve the operational efficiency, flexibility, and capacity of the Public Works Department to meet the town's growing needs, to manage contractors, respond to work order requests, oversee development projects, plan and implement infrastructure improvements, improve communications to residents about road construction, comply with the Mass DEP 2030 Solid Waste Management Plan, and maintain complete streets infrastructure. Consider what technology platforms are needed to support the department. Councilor Palumbo said no change. Councilor Feltner suggested some wording at the end of this to delete the word consider technology platforms that are needed to support the department. So I just want to point out that if you look at the new item number 1, which was submitted later on, it talks about adding the new request number 1 talks about adding a recycling quarter in the Public Works Department. That was actually, we added this phrase here, comply with the Mass DEP 2030 Solid Waste Management Plan last year to specifically address that issue. So I just did want to let everyone know that. So I would believe, we would like to, it would be my belief to leave this with no changes for the next year. Councilor Canellis, your thoughts?
No change.
Okay, Councilor Donato?
If I remember correctly, we spent a lot of time on this item last year, getting the wording correct, and I'm comfortable with keeping.
Okay. Mr. Manager, do you have any comments?
No, sir.
Thank you. Okay, any counselors want to speak to this? Councilor Feltner?
Hi, again, I just simplified the wording somewhat because some of these things have been met, and giving the hiring of the CIO, I figured that position was going to be considering platforms that would be needed to support the department. But I have no problem if you leaving all these specific things in as written.
Great, thank you. Thank you, Lisa. Appreciate that. All right, so any member of the public want to speak to this, this item? Okay, seeing none, let's bring it back to the committee. So the recommendation would be to leave it with no change. Councilor Canellis,
I agree.
Councilor Donato,
I agree.
and I agree also. Okay, okay, move down to the next page. 2D. This was consider the recommendations of the townwide information technology assessment to review acquisition, distribution, and management of IT resources, including staffing levels and positions required to support the town's IT environment, improve the functionality of the town's website, and improve communications with residents. So we got two comments. Council Palumba recommend this be deleted as completed. And Councilor Donato recommended changing, consider the recommendation of the townwide information technology assessment to empower the chief information officer. I would just like to, so I just want to point out that we've hired a new chief information officer who started on October 19th, 2020. That was one of the recommendations of the IT assessment. So I think there's still a lot to be done with this, but I think we should modify it to show that. So my thoughts on this, I know Councilor Donato recommended empowering the chief information officer, but maybe it would be more appropriate to change that first phrase to say, with the hiring of the chief information officer, comma, carry out the remaining recommendations of the townwide information assessment, IT assessment. I think that would make it clear that there's still more to be done, even though we've hired this key position. So that's my thoughts. With the hiring of the chief information officer, comma, carry out the remaining recommendations. Councilor Canellis, do you have any thoughts on this?
Thank you. I would support your change. I do not feel comfortable with the word empower because there is a process, and I don't think that any one department head can be empowered.
Okay, great. Councilor Donato, I didn't mean to sort of pick apart your recommendation, but it's good, but I just, my thoughts, your thoughts, I've already spoken. So.
Oh, that's fine. I'm comfortable with the language that you suggested. I agree with you. I don't think that this item is completed, so I just wanted to, press that language to make sure it stays in here, but to also have it reflect the fact that we have an act. So I'm very comfortable with the suggestion.
Great, thank you. Okay, so Mr. Manager, do you have any comments?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee, without getting into the language on changing it from fiscal 2021 to 2022, I would concur with all three of the committee members that there is going to be a significant amount of work done with a new CIO in fiscal year 2021, but will be a lot more to do in fiscal year 2022. So I would respectfully hope that there can be a budget guideline indicating we'll be looking for more resources to address many of the recommendations in the IT assessment study, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Manager. Okay, so now the counselors, I see Counselor Fellner has her hand up. Go ahead, Lisa.
Thank you. Yes, I'm kind of laughing because I agree with you, Vinny. I thought that I submitted a similar comment and I obviously didn't. Yeah, because I'm concerned about not only that we carry out more of the recommendations in that report, but that the council has not discussed and reviewed the report publicly either. So I support your recommendation.
Great, thank you. Any member of the public want to speak to this
Vinny,
matter?
can you just read back your statement for us?
Okay. Yes, so it would say, so the first phrase would say, with the hiring of the chief information officer, comma, carry out the remaining recommendations of the townwide information technology assessment, ... Okay. So any member of the public want to speak? So seeing none, let's bring it back to the committee. So the recommendation would be to change it, to modify it by changing that first phrase to, with the hiring of the chief information officer, comma, carry out the remaining recommendations of the townwide information technology assessment, ... with the rest of it remains unchanged. So Councilor Canellis, do you agree?
I agree with the statement set forward.
Councilor Donato, do you agree?
I agree as well.
And I agree also. Okay, so that's unanimous. Moving down to the next one, which is 2E. 2E currently reads, continue to work collaboratively with the Watertown Public Schools to develop a comprehensive multi-year educational budget that assures sustainable funding for our schools and the successful education of our children. Seek to accommodate the manager's forecast 5% school operating budget increase for fiscal year 21, subject to preparation of budget requests by the school committee and subject to the validation of revenue and expenditure assumptions in the October 8th, 2019 preliminary budget overview. Conduct further review to examine the sustainability of 5% increases in fiscal year 22 and beyond. So this is interesting, as we all know, because that did not happen in fiscal year 21, and certainly fiscal year 22 is a challenge. So we've got 4 comments from counselors. So Councilor Palumba said amended to reflect that the manager's fiscal year 22 budget calls for a 3% increase, but that the 5% increase should be considered for fiscal year 23 and beyond. Councilor Feltner basically said change this to continue to work collaboratively with the Watertown Public Schools on the comprehensive 5-year education budget that assures sustainable funding for our schools and the successful education of our children. Conduct further review to examine the sustainability of increases in fiscal year 22 and beyond. Councilor Donato recommended deleting the last 2 sentences. President Sideris said, I would suggest we do not put a number on the increase for schools given the uncertainties related to COVID-19. So I will just say for the members of the public that are listening, the education appropriation is our single biggest expense. And it's also by the nature of the school collective bargaining agreements. It's one of those departments which even for a level service budget, can't live within the 2.5% confines. I would say, from my perspective, there's still significant uncertainty on the impacts of COVID-19 on the town's budget, and the strategy for developing future budgets is fluid. Thus, I agree with Councilor Donato and also Council President Sedaris that the last two sentences should be deleted, and I believe should be replaced with, quote, in consideration of the ongoing impacts of COVID-19 on the town's budget, seek to accommodate a fiscal year 22 education appropriation that will provide level service funding for our schools. So I will just, so for the people that are listening, even during the depths of the darkest days of the 2008 through 2014 financial crisis, we never, ever reduced the education appropriation. Even though other departments were cut significantly, we never reduced the school appropriation. And I think we have, over the years, sought to not just meet the level service funding, but also to add additional things. And we've actually done a 5% increase, I want to believe, Mr. Manager, has been for the last 4 years, or last 5 years, I don't quite remember. So we have really built a lot of capacity back into the schools. I think for this year, there are so many unknowns. I know the manager has proposed in the preliminary budget overview a 3% increase. I believe that's the minimum the school department needs for a level service budget. I would just like to, rather than specify the actual percentage, I would just say, you know, we would seek to accommodate a level service funding appropriation. So that's my thoughts on that. Councilor Canellis, your thoughts?
I agree wholeheartedly. In addition to your statement, also Councilor Donato and Council President Sedaris' statements.
Councilor Donato, your thoughts?
I'm fine with the deletion of the last two sentences in our proposed language.
Okay. Mr. Manager, do you have any comments?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, I've got 2 points. One is I concur with the language, the discussion of the committee before opening it up, but in particularly the Council President Sedaris's suggestion about not putting a number on for the fiscal year 2022 budget guideline. So I would concur with that. The second one, just as housekeeping only, under the first comment from Council Palumbo, just the 3% that's listed there at the top of there is actually, and it was just a, if you will, an expenditure forecast, but it was actually calling for 3.5%. So perhaps, Mr. Chairman, if when you finish the document doesn't change what's going to, what my suggestion, the proposal is going to be, but just so that school committee folks or anyone else, that the truth in lending, the forecast alone was at 3.5% for fiscal year 22 and beyond. That being said, I think COVID-19, the uncertainty of it, is going to, the more prudent approach is not having a percentage, and the language that was been proposed, given what the suggestion from the council president and the chairman's remarks and the other committee members, I respectfully ask your favorable consideration of not putting a percentage on that. Thank you.
Okay. Any councilors want to speak? Councilor Feltner?
Yes, thank you. I agree with not putting a number on it, which is why I said just consider further review. So I wouldn't even want to say seek for level service funding. I'd rather, basically what I did was delete the last part, like Anthony Donato suggested as well, in my statement. So I think I'm in agreement with President Sedaris and others in leaving the number off, but I do want to support making a statement that we will continue to work collaboratively in ensuring funding and successful education of our children, and not have to stick with a specific percentage of increase, but just consider any reviews given the uncertainties.
Okay, great, thanks. Okay, any other counselors? Don't see any. Any members of the public want to speak to the education appropriation?
Vinny, just real quick, there were two comments in the chat. One from Leo Martin that said he would agree with my suggestion to delete the last two sentences. And then there was another comment from Elodia Thomas who said that she agreed with Council President Sedaris.
Okay. Thank you for looking at that, because I actually can't see the chat. I got too many windows open, so I really appreciate Anthony, you doing that for me. So that's the, all right, so let's go back to the committee discussion. I understand we don't want to put a number. Personally, I just feel very strongly that with the statement that we should seek to accommodate a level service funding for our schools, with the understanding that something less than level service means they would actually have to make cuts in service. And I don't think at this point, I'm not comfortable with sending that message to the parents of children in Watertown. It doesn't say absolutely make it level service, but it says work collaboratively to seek to do it. So there's a lot of wiggle room there, but I think that the message is important. So I would like to just delete the last two sentences and replace it with the one that says, in consideration of the ongoing impacts of COVID-19 on the town's budget, seek to accommodate a fiscal year 22 education appropriation that will provide level service funding for our schools. So that's, so Councilor Canales, do you agree?
I would agree.
Councilor Donato, would you agree?
I do agree, yes.
Okay, and I agree also. Thank you. That's always, education is always the really tough one, so.
I'm sorry, can I just clarify? I'm sorry,
Sure, Lisa.
interjecting. I just want to be sure. It sounds like, of course, this is overly optimistic perhaps, but by the level service funding, it sounds like you're putting a ceiling on a best case scenario of level service funding versus not, I mean, I think you just said you indicated you wanted to send a message that we weren't proposing cuts, although that we don't know what the percentage would be for level service funding yet, to the town manager's point, whether it's 3 or 3.5%.
So just from a practical standpoint, if you look at the numbers that were in the school budget presentations, they need almost a 3.5% increase just for the level of service budget. That's, whereas every other town department, it's 2.5%, but because of the way the steps and lanes work in the school collective bargaining agreement, they need almost 3.5%. So if you look at like last year's budget presentation about where the increase came from, it's pretty close. I mean, that's just sort of the way it works. I mean, this is certainly not a cap. This is sort of a floor. If everything goes back to normal and revenues go back to normal, and the state gives us the agreed upon increase in Chapter 70 money, then everything's good. We don't have to worry about it. But I think the message we want to send is we can't propose 5%, but we're going to give at a minimum level. We'll seek to do a level service. So that's I think the right message. It's definitely not just a cap. Just so you know. Okay.
Okay, I just hope that gets in the minutes, because if I could see, if I was an educator, it's just not clear to me that
earlier I was saying worst case scenario, free cash. Now I'm saying, of course, hopefully optimistic to state everything you said is funding coming through. But I just want to be careful what kind of message. I mean, it could be even worse, like you said, first comes to serve. Maybe we can't do level service funding after all. But I'm just a little concerned with the message that we may be sending. So somehow maybe that's reflected in minutes, if not in the wording of the guideline. I think that would be to everyone's benefit.
Okay, good point. Mr. Driscoll, do you have a comment to that?
Yeah, just to follow up on Councilor Feltner's query about in the minutes. So the one thing, just for background for everyone listening in and seeing the minutes later, just for fiscal year 2021, the superintendent of schools, Dr. Galston, had developed a budget that was before the school committee that was roughly an increase of $2.5 million, or on or about a 5% increase. The actual budget that was submitted on June 8th to town council reduced that by over $1 million. So the appropriation went up just shy of $1 million from fiscal year 20 to fiscal year 21, went up about $1.5 million, which is at 2.97%, or rounding it up to 3%. So that's the background on that. I think certainly all the comments made in the input and discussion paragraph clearly realizes if fiscal 21, the concern we have with hotel, meals, and everyone else it's going the wrong way. And then fiscal year, the uncertainty of the revenues for fiscal year 2022, we'll be looking at the exact same type of scenario. And I think everyone wants to provide a education budget that is successful education of our children, but also need to keep in mind the uncertainty of COVID. So that's the background information, Mr. Chairman, on what happened in fiscal year 21 budget. Thank you.
Okay. Okay, so we're ready to move on to 2F. Let me just make a note to myself. Okay, so 2F is continue to work with the Watertown Transportation Management Association to identify sustainable sources of funding, including tax revenue if needed, for the pilot shuttle bus program. Councilor Palumba noted this should remain, even though the town has received a grant of over $220,000, which was then later reduced by $100,000, and the program is in flux. Councilor Feltner wanted to change it and delete the additional sources of funding by just changing it to continue working to strengthen the Watertown TMA, including a shuttle bus program. From my perspective, I think we added last year that last phrase that said including tax revenue if needed. After substantial discussion, I think that is important and it should remain there. So I would recommend no changes needed to this. Councilor Canellis, your thoughts?
Changes.
Okay, Councilor Donato.
I'm comfortable with the language as is.
Mr. Driscoll.
Sir.
Okay. Any councilors who want to speak to this? Seeing none, any members of the public want to speak to this? Seeing none, let's come back to the committee. So the recommendation would be no changes. Councilor Canellis.
Agreed.
Councilor Donato.
Agreed.
Okay, and I agree also. All right, so on to the next page. So this one, 2G, this came up in earlier discussions. So move forward with funding to develop the Watertown Climate and Energy Master Plan. Councilor Palumba noted this is completed and should be removed. Councilor Feltner said to change this to move forward with developing the Watertown Climate and Energy Master Plan, supporting operations and transition to 100% renewable energy. Councilor Donato noted this should be deleted. And I wanted to point out that to the public that the town council appropriated funds, $102,000 on October 27th to proceed with the plan. So I think this budget party guideline was for funding the plan. Now we actually need to get into the, that we actually need to do the plan. So that's my perspective that we should just delete this. Councilor Canellis, do you have any thoughts?
Same, completed.
Okay, Councilor Donato.
I agree. I just.
Okay. Mr. Driscoll, did you have any comments?
No, sir.
Okay. Members of the, any counselors want to weigh in on this? I know we discussed this.
Again, it just, was voted after we submitted the policy guidelines for the funding, so.
Great. No, I appreciate that, Lisa. Any members of the public want to speak to this? I see Jennifer Smith, just your name and your address.
Sure. Hi, my name is Jennifer Smith. I live on 10 Oliver Road in East Watertown. I just had a question. If the plan is not complete and requires additional funding, is there a way to get it in the 2022 budget if it's not in there now?
I'm going to let the manager perhaps answer that question.
Mr. Chairman, to the question asked by the resident, with the dollar amount at the budget amendment was brought forward, as Councilor Canellis alluded to, with $102,000 and change. That was the amount of money needed that we had pursued a grant from the Commonwealth. We didn't prevail. That's the estimate of what it's going to cost to complete the plan. I would respectfully suggest, given the budget policy guideline the council has, is to move forward with the development of the Watertown Climate and Energy Master Plan. We would certainly make any further recommendations to town council to actually do that, to develop the Watertown Climate and Energy Master Plan. I really don't want to speak too much more further on it because I'd prefer that it get done with the monies that's already been appropriated. But to that end, if there was something that came up that there was a need for a little more dollar amounts to get the Climate and Energy Master Plan done, I would respectfully suggest, given the current fiscal year 21 budget policy guideline, we'd go back to town council to address it. But it's Mr. Magoon had developed the dollar amounts that were needed, and I'm very confident that the amount of money that town council appropriated last Tuesday will get the Climate and Energy Master Plan completed. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so Ms. Smith, does that answer your questions?
Yes, thank you.
Okay.
And so is it important that it's in the minutes that Mr. Driscoll said that they would find some money if it was needed?
Yeah, I mean, well, that's our standard.
Okay.
Yeah, we do that all the time with transfers of fund if things run over. And I know this was with a lot of the Sunrise Movement people who've written to us that this is a hot topic. So I just want to say that. So the first step is we passed the 100% renewable energy resolution in January of 2019. One of the key action items was to create this climate and energy master plan. We are at the point, so that was in the budget party last year, fiscal year 21. So we appropriated the money here in fiscal year 21. Now we're going to do the plan. I think Mr. Magoon said it was going to take about 10 months to do the plan. And then once the plan is done and presented to the council and the council votes on it, there will be a lot of action items and implementation of the plan. And just so everybody knows, the general process is, as each of those implementation items comes forward, if it costs money, those things will find its way back on this list in a future year about things we want to do, or several years, because as we all know, the action items for the climate and energy master plan, we've set a target of 100% renewable electricity by 2035 and 100% renewable energy for heating and transportation by 2050. So there's going to be a lot of work to do. And I will just say this for all of the people who are still on the call. One area that you can make a difference if you're concerned about climate change is to attend the public forums, provide input as the plan is developed. This is something that we are going to look for citizens and residents to come forward and actually participate in that. So I just wanted to throw that out there in case you thought about it. The next person who's on the list is Layla Mandel. Go ahead and just give your address and go ahead and make your comments.
Okay, yeah, so my name's Layla Mandel. I live on 124 Maplewood Street. I'm 17 years old and I'm not quite sure if this is the place to ask, but I would just like to know how the Committee of the Budget and Fiscal Oversight will specifically address setting aside resources for old building efficiency audits.
Okay, well so we will, so that's a great question. That is absolutely a great question. So a couple of things going on, with school construction, we decided to tear down the Cunniff and Hosmer and build them as 2 new net zero energy schools because we actually increased the cost of those projects from $153 million to $170 million to do that. But we felt that that was in the best interest of the community for a variety of reasons, not the least of which we voted a renewable energy resolution that said we were going to be moving to 100% renewable energy for electricity by 2035 and for heating by 2050. And we're building these buildings. These buildings will be here 100 years from now. So we felt that there was a certain moral imperative that we do that. I think in the long term, it'll benefit this community. And in the long term, I'm talking 30, 50 year range to have these as net zero energy buildings. So that's number one. Number two, we did an ESCO, an energy service company, energy upgrade. Mr. Manager, help me here. 2012, I want to think we did, which put together a bunch of all our existing older buildings with energy upgrades. That was a 20-year program, had 20-year bonds to pay for the cost of the energy upgrades. Part of that process with two things. The contract with Johnson Controls, who did the energy upgrades, included an annual measurement and verification part to the contract to make sure we're actually getting the energy savings that we were promised, number one. Number two, we did hire a full-time energy manager, Ed Lewis. His responsibility is to examine the energy needs of our building and make sure that they're being as efficient as possible. And he leads up the Watertown Environment and Energy Efficiency Committee and works with the citizen groups to seek additional ways to make our buildings more energy efficient. So that's the short answer. I hope that answers your question.
Thank you.
Next, we have Lena Taffel, just to give us your address.
Hi, my name is Lana Taffel. I'm 17 years old and my address is 88 Whites Avenue. This is a topic that I feel very strongly about, and I just would like to know if there are any plans in place for funding public data tools to track down the town's climate change progress.
That's another great question. I would encourage you to attend the public forums as we develop the climate energy master plan and ask that very question, because that, in my mind, is something that absolutely needs to be there. We need to establish, in order for this to work, we need to establish a baseline, what we're using now, not just public buildings, but also, private buildings, your parents' home, what you're using for electricity and gas or oil to heat it. And we need to come up with a baseline about how much carbon Watertown as a whole is putting into the atmosphere. And so we can actually track our progress year after year to make sure, we are making adequate annual process to hitting those goals. This is not, you know, I'm an engineer and I tend to think in an engineering way. You just can't set a goal and then just hope and pray that when that year comes, you will have hit it. You actually have to come up with an action plan, what you're going to do every year, and then track progress to it. And if you're falling behind, you need to double down and say, okay, how are we going to catch up? So yes, I would absolutely say that that would be part of the plan. Does that answer your question? Okay.
Yes, it does. Thank you.
Okay, great, thank you. Next hand up is Miriam Karachi. Just give us your address.
Hello, my name is Miriam Karachi. I'm 17 years old and I live on 9 Bartlett Street. And I would like to know how the Committee of the Budget and Fiscal Oversight will specifically address green transportation.
Well, transportation is a hot topic in Watertown. And, you know, one of the things that we've been moving forward with is the creation of the Watertown Transit Management Association, which is basically a sort of like a private bus service in Watertown to let people live in Watertown and move around without using a car. So there's been a lot of struggles kind of getting that off the ground, both financially and technically. The other thing we've done is we did about 4 years ago, we passed a Transportation Demand Management Ordinance, which puts strict guidelines on owners and developers of large projects to reduce single vehicle use trips and through a variety of techniques. We've been imposing that as an ordinance, which means it's a law that's being imposed on all these new big buildings. And it's requiring things like owners of buildings to like provide free T-passes to employees, to put, you see the blue bike stations, you know, that grew out of that, contribute financially to the TMA shuttle. So we are taking that. So we've actually set some targets to reduce our single vehicle use trips by a specific amount, and that's in the ordinance. I don't have it in front of me, but it is, we've set some aggressive targets to do that. So that'll be, and again, the goal in the plan, the resolution that we approved is 100% renewable energy for transportation by 2050. Some of the technology that's going to enable us to do that has not been developed yet. But if 10 years ago you said people would be driving electric Tesla cars, you know, they didn't exist. So, you know, there's a lot that needs to be done. So the plan is going to set some targets and we need to make sure that we work towards those. Okay, next I see Carolyn Gully. If you just give us your address.
Hello, my name is Carolyn and I live at 11 Belknap Terrace, and I am also 17 years old, like a lot of the other people who've spoken. And I was wondering if the town council has any plans for subsidizing solar panels or electric vehicles.
At this point, subsidizing, which means taking your tax dollars and giving them to somebody else, not yet. We have been, we're in the early days of, I mean, we are requiring developers to put in electric charging stations. We did pass the very first ordinance on the East Coast, which required solar panels to be installed on buildings over 10,000 square feet. So a lot of the costs of doing that are being shifted, not as subsidies per se, but actually being shifted onto the developers who are building the new buildings. I'm not saying subsidies are out of the question, but I would leave it to the people who develop the climate and energy master plan to maybe answer that question. Okay, and I see Jennifer Smith has her hand up again. Ms. Smith.
Sorry, I just never took it down.
Oh, okay, sorry, I lost track of who had their hands up. Thank you. All right, so
there is one comment in the chat I'll read into the record. It's from Rita Hackert, and she would like to state that she feels very strongly the climate plan should be a priority and be completed.
Okay, good, thank you. I see now Liana Rice has her hand up.
Yeah, hi, I'm Liana. I'm 17 years old, like everyone else who spoke recently. I live on 7 Cuba Street, and I'm wondering, I would like to know how the Committee of Budget and Fiscal Oversight will specifically address energy efficiency.
So we're not actually addressing energy efficiency per se in this. The energy efficiency is inherent in the climate and energy. That's why it's not just a climate action plan, it's a climate and energy master plan. And you know, the cheapest energy to generate is the energy you save by not using it. So that. I think that's inherent in the plan. The specifics about what we're going to do and how we're going to do it need to be developed with input from the community and actually put in the plan, and then that will inform us on how we move forward.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Okay. Any other comments from the public? You know, I am really excited about the number of people that are interested in this, and I can't say it enough that, you know, don't be shy and please show up at the public forums when we develop this plan, because your input is going to be crucial. All right, so seeing no further comments, the recommendation is that this is going to be completed for now and needs to be removed. So Councilor Canellis, do you agree?
Agree.
Councilor Donato, do you agree?
I agree, and I just, you know, to somebody's comment earlier about if there needs to be more funding, is that something that we could accomplish? I just wanted to make note of the fact that the amendment and the appropriation to fund the climate and energy master plan passed 9-0. So there is, you know, a lot of support on the council to move forward with this. But I am in favor of the recommendation.
Yeah, and let me reiterate that. So the climate action, the 100% renewable energy resolution that we passed in January of 2019 was unanimous. And if you look at a lot of other cities around Massachusetts, it's not unanimous, but this council has been 100% behind this effort. So I see that Miriam has raised her hand again. Miriam, did you want to make another comment?
Oh, yes, I had another question. So do I have to state my address again?
No, we already know it.
Okay, well, another thing I would like to specifically address is how you guys would go about creating public electric vehicle charging stations.
That's a great question. So a lot of it is we're incentivizing developers to do it. Ed Lewis, our energy manager, is currently pursuing several grants to actually pay for them to be installed on municipal property, say behind the library and at the DPW. That is something that in the master plan, we are going to have more of. There's a lot in Watertown, you know, there needs to be a lot more, because if we want people to transition to electric vehicles, we need to provide them the ability to charge them. So yes, that is something that we are going to need to do a lot more of. And just so you know, I have a plug-in electric vehicle, which I plug in at home. So I've been driving it for 6 years. So it's very excited about it. So Elodia Thomas.
Could I suggest that the young people that are attending the meeting this evening get involved with the various commissions or committees in town that address the energy issues that they're so concerned about? They should go and read the previous minutes to get an idea of what the issues are and get engaged at the ground floor. This is an overall budget priority meeting, and some of us have been at it all day. It's already getting on 9 o'clock. And while I respect their interest and enthusiasm, I don't think that this is the forum to bring in all these specific questions. I suggest that they really get in at the ground roots level and know all the initiatives that Watertown is undertaking. Thank you.
Looks like we lost Counselor Picciarelli again. Counselor Canellis or Counselor Donato, did you want to pick up where we were?
I would tend to suggest that we maybe give Counselor Picciarelli a second to jump back on here.
I think so.
I know I think his original plan was to try to get through the entire document this evening, given the time. And I think maybe, Mr. Magoon, if you could, I know you mentioned it earlier, but maybe it was before the person who asked their most recent question about the charging statements. I believe you had mentioned earlier that we had received a grant from National Grid.
Yeah, we've received a grant from Eversource and we'll install 2 stations behind the library and the town hall complex, and then also install one at the Department of Public Works. And I see Counselor Picciarelli is back.
Yeah, sorry, my internet dropped off again, so it must be the squirrels and the wires. So sorry about that. Let me just get back to where we are, get back to sharing the screen. Okay, so sorry, everyone. That's just patience is what we all need here. All right, so are we done with this item now here? Are we ready to move on to 2H?
Yes.
Can I just make one comment? Sorry, I have my hand raised.
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay, go ahead.
That's okay, just briefly. I was just going to say that I think it's great that that we have more people than usual, and some ways Zoom is making it easier for the youth to participate. And to me, it just shows that, we don't really have a participatory budget process. And to Elodia's point, yes, as much as you can get on the ground, work in the committees, would be great. But I think it does point out some areas where we could improve things. Thank you.
Okay, great. All right, so moving on to 2H, which is update the 5-year plan and funding schedule for the integrated improvements of the town's streets and sidewalks, water, sewer, stormwater infrastructure, and underground utilities. The plan should show status of ongoing projects, identify future projects, including those with no funding source, and include upgrade of all water meters, identify sources of stormwater and sewage outflows to the Charles River in coordination with the water, sewer, stormwater projects, and underground utility projects. I know that's a mouthful, but this is another big amount of money. Councilor Palumba suggested we change 5-year plan to 3-year plan. This has been on our list for many years, and there's been no movement to create a 5-year plan. Each year the department presents and the town council approves a 1-year plan. I would eliminate it or reduce it to a 3-year plan with the hopes the new director of the department, when hired, makes this a priority. And Councilor Fellner asked to add by specific street after status of ongoing projects. I will just note that the capital improvement program, which actually provides the funding for this, is a 5-year plan. Even though the potential streets for the local road program are identified several years in advance. However, they're not publicly identified until the year that the recommendation for funding is made. And the reason for that is because the roads can change based on changing conditions. So there's a lot of things that can change with road construction over the course of 5 years. So I do not support changing it to a 3-year plan or adding the specific streets, because we've had this discussion that by putting specific streets in early in the project, people get their hopes get dashed when their street gets removed from the list. So we don't typically put in the actual specific streets until the year we're actually voting on the loan order to do the work. So my recommendation would be to keep it as is. Councilor Canellis.
There is a rationale for why the wording was put into place as it is, and I would appreciate if we were able to keep it in the same format.
Okay, Councilor Donato.
I'm comfortable with the language as is.
Mr. Manager.
I have no comment, sir.
Thank you. Okay, for the councilors, Councilor Feltner.
Sorry, I guess, I mean, I understand what you're saying, the year of funding, but I don't know why, if you're determining, well, let's just say it's fine to leave it as I'm hopeful with a new head of DPW that we could make some progress on this, including with our sidewalks.
Good, absolutely. I have high hopes pinned on getting a new DPW superintendent. Okay, any members of the public want to speak? Seeing none, so the recommendation would be to keep it as is. Councilor Canellis, do you agree?
Agreed.
Councilor Donato?
I agree.
And I agree also. Very good. The next, moving down to 2I, enhance the capabilities of the Department of Community Development and Planning by adding resources and/or redeploying additional resources. Councilor Feltner wanted to change this to add including support for policy for public art and its funding. And Councilor Donato suggested changing enhance to continue to enhance. So just so everybody knows, public art policy and funding is in priority 2N. That's still ongoing. That has not been finished. So when we get to point 2N, I would like to still keep 2N active rather than removing it and including it here, because it does talk about funding, not just support for the policy. And I do agree with Councilor Donato's change to continue to enhance, because we actually have added several resources over the years to the department. So I would agree with changing enhance to continue to enhance. That would be my recommendation. Councilor Canellis, your thoughts?
Agreed.
Councilor Donato?
No further comment.
Mr. Manager?
Mr. Chairman, again, just I would compliment the town councils from fiscal years 2017 and 2020. There were additions: assistant building inspector, transportation planner, code enforcement officer, a senior environmental planner, a part-time principal account clerk. And then as a follow-up to the fiscal year 2021 budget policy guideline, Mr. Magoon did request additional funding for a planner and public art funding, and certainly giving the impacts of COVID on the Commonwealth, COVID-19 on the Commonwealth's and the town's budgets. These additional funds weren't considered, funding requests weren't considered in fiscal year 2021. So I certainly respectfully ask the continuation of the in fiscal year 2022 to with the words continue to enhance. Thank you.
Thank you. Any councilors want to speak to this?
Sorry, I again, my buttons are slow, so I'm just going to take mute and not deal with the other ones. Just, is public art anywhere else? Because I don't have yours. I could see your screen, but I don't have the actual full document up.
It's in 2N right here.
Thank you.
So, okay, so anybody from the public want to speak to this item? Okay, seeing none, so the recommendation would be to modify it to change enhance to continue to enhance. Councilor Canellis, do you agree?
Agreed.
Councilor Donato, do you agree?
Yes.
And I agree also. So very good. Item 2J. This was another one that we worked very hard getting the language correct. Continue to enhance the capabilities of the Department of Public Works Forestry Department by adding resources and/or redeploying additional resources for improving Watertown's public shade trees and increasing the town's overall tree canopy by 1, developing a robust data collection process for public shade trees in Watertown, and 2, analyzing the data to determine an action plan and seek collaboration and partnership opportunities with community groups such as Trees for Watertown. So Councilor Palumbo suggested that given we have hired a forestry supervisor, tree warden, I would delete the following leave the goal regarding the tree canopy, replace, continue to enhance the capabilities of the Department of Public Works, Forestry Department by adding resources and or redeploying additional resources for improving to just improve.
Can you scroll so we can read it?
Can you, oh, sorry, I'm sorry. Oh, my bad. I forgot to, I'm sorry, Caroline. That's why I need a third arm to really run a Zoom meeting.
It's fine. I can understand that. I just thought, I know a lot of the people don't have it. I have it, but they don't. So I just wanted it for them.
I'm so sorry. It just about that. And then Councilor Feltner suggested some the basic thing with some minor rewording of this. So I just want to point out that we hired a new tree warden to fill an existing vacancy. So that did not fall under the category of adding any capabilities or enhancing the capabilities. That was just a filling of an existing vacancy. So I don't really agree with taking that all out of there as suggested by Councilor Palumbo, because we did specifically talked about things we could do to enhance the capabilities, which would be something more than what's currently in the budget. So, and again, this committee, both the Public Works Committee as well as this committee, really spent a lot of time working on the wording of this. I would be happy to keep it as is. Councilor Canellis.
No changes.
Councilor Donato.
I'm comfortable with the language as is.
Mr. Manager, do you have any comments?
No, sir.
Any councilors have any comments?
Hi, it's me, Lisa. I think the only thing that I added was and maintaining, so it wasn't just to develop the data collection, but to develop and maintain the data that's collected for the public shade trees in Watertown.
Yeah, and if you go back to our discussions we had at the Public Works Committee about this, the developing data collection, it would be an annual process because every year new trees are planted, other trees are cut down. So it's not intended to be static database. It would be an annual, we would expect it to be updated annually. So that's implicit.
Okay, that's fine. It's just that the initial cost, I would think that, could cost more, but that's fine.
Yeah, well, because trees, by their very nature, this would need to be updated annually in order to really make it work. So, okay, anyone from the public want to speak to this issue? Okay, seeing none. So the recommendation would be to keep it as is. Councilor Canellis, do you agree?
Agreed.
Councilor Donato, do you agree?
I agree. And
I agree also. Okay, very good. Going on to K. Based on the final policy direction to be developed by the town council and input from the Community Preservation Committee, develop a budgetary plan to meet the identified needs for acquisition of land for open space and or recreational use. Councilor Feltner basically requested changing that to delete any references to the Community Preservation Committee or the developing a budgetary plan. I just want to note that the Community Preservation Committee has a potential role to play for the acquisition of land for open space or recreational use. And we had quite a bit of discussion about this in past years. So whether we actually use CPA money or not to acquire land, that is one of the key reasons the CPA exists. So I would agree to just keep it as is. Councilor Canellis, do you have any comments?
No comments.
Councilor Donato, do you have any comments?
I'm comfortable with the existing language.
Mr. Manager, do you have any comments?
No, sir.
Any counselors like to speak to this? Lisa?
Yeah, I guess, given how we handle all the other guidelines, I mean, I think open space should be a top priority, but we haven't talked about that as a council, kind of to Councilor Woodland's point about some other things. So it's more thinking, I feel like we need to initiate discussions with the town manager, and of course CPC has a role in that, but they have a unique role in that. Not, it's not the be all end all. So I hope we move forward on this. I'm a little confused really where we stand on this. I mean, it says based on final policy direction to be developed. So I think it's good that it's forward looking and not reactive, but all our other guidelines tend to be more reactive after a lot of committee work has been done. So I don't know if that's a discussion for another day or if you care to comment tonight.
Yeah, just so the public knows, we've actually, the last discussion with the council was an executive session. We had agreed to have additional, as you recall, the Human Services Committee, I believe was the Human Services Committee, and the Conservation Commission met in executive session to develop some recommendations for moving forward with acquisition of land. As you know, acquisition of land is something that cannot be discussed in open session because it puts the town's bargaining position at risk. To develop a budgetary plan for the acquisition of land is something we need to talk about with the council in executive session, to develop a strategy if we want to identify a piece of land to purchase and how we would go about purchasing it. That's still, in my mind, a very hot topic. What role remains to be seen what role the Community Preservation Committee could or would play, but they certainly have a role to play. So this is still, in my mind, still is a priority. And I think it's a priority for many people in the community. I hope that answers your question. I see Leo Martin, who, just so people know, he's the chair of the Conservation Commission. I will recognize you, Leo.
Thank you, Leo Martin, 683 Main Street. I'm thrilled that this item is in there. It was in last year's budget, and I'm just thrilled it's there again this year. And just hopefully something will happen. But I want to thank the council that put that item on the guidelines. Thank you so much.
Thank you. And Elodia. And just so the public knows, Elodia Thomas is the chair of the Community Preservation Committee. Go ahead, Elodia.
Thank you, Councillor Picciarelli. I'd like to agree with Lisa on this, because I've been watching this go year after year in the budget and have talked about it even before I was on the CPC. But to say input from the Community Preservation Committee, we don't provide input on this. We are a body that evaluates project proposals. And I have yet to see the town council come up with a plan of what they want to do with regard to open space. It's a highly important issue for many in this community, as we found out at our public forum and through our community preservation survey, but we do not initiate things. We evaluate the proposals, we make recommendations, and who do we make the recommendations to? The town council, who ultimately votes the recommendation up or down, or can cut the funding a bit if they feel that the funding is too high. But to say input from the CPC, I think is inappropriate, because we don't weigh in as an equal member of this. We only come on once we have a proposal before us. So personally, as a resident, leaving me out as the chair of the CPC, I would like the council to take a much more active stand on this particular issue, because it's a very hot topic in Watertown. I also think it's a bit bogus to say that we don't know what properties we're interested in because they've been written about over and over again. not only when the CPC was up for the vote to bring it into Watertown, but if you read the open space plan or you read the comprehensive plan, we know how small Watertown is, 4 square miles. We know it's out there. Let's please get on this. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councilor Gannon.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. And to follow up on Ms. Thomas' perspective, often other towns work with their conservation commissions, since a lot of conservation commissions have identified these properties already. And there is funding and conservation commissions for, coming up with plans of this nature. So I think the council should work with the Conservation Commission, not in a silo. But I agree with Lodi Thomas' perspective that it's not the role of the Community Preservation Committee to come up with these proposals, but rather to do the scrutiny involved of projects that come to be recommended before the Community Preservation Committee. So, and I believe maybe Steve Magoon can talk to the open space plan, which is already probably identified a number of properties of town priority. But I do recommend that council committee, get its act together on a town council format as well.
Yeah, if I could just say that the short list of properties to acquire actually came out of, as I mentioned earlier, came out of a joint committee meetings with the Human Services Committee of the Town Council and the Conservation Commission meeting in executive session. So that already has been done.
Okay.
The reason Elodie and I often agree on most things, I will just say that the reason we put in input from the community preservation here is that we understand that yes, the Community Preservation Committee does not play a role in selecting properties to acquire or perhaps improve that if they've been acquired, but they would perhaps play a role in developing the budgetary plan. And I think the important, because this is a budget priority guideline, this is not intended to, our role here is not to pick the property. Our role here is to say, once the town council or someone else identifies a piece of property that we want to acquire, we need to put together a budgetary plan. Who's going to pay for it? How's it going to go? And that the Community Preservation Committee could play a role in doing that if they agree to accept the proposal and present it to the town council for the town council to vote. So I think I'm just taking a step back and looking at sort of the big picture.
And if I may, Mr. Chair, so oftentimes a property comes available on a hot market. There's no time to have a deliberative process. Well, shall we choose this property? I believe what town council should do would be to delegate to the town manager, identify a funding source, delegate some direction to the town manager to have the executive staff go out and pursue these properties, because it's a hot market. It always has been in Watertown for that matter, but we need a little more direction, a little more flexibility, a little more speed. And that direction is going to come from the town council, not to ponder it over, a many-month process, but to designate the town manager to file an option to purchase at the very least, to bank that committee and leave the town with the option to then look at the property and evaluate it. But the ability to scoop up an option on the property from the get-go would be something would provide the flexibility that the town would need.
I'd like to agree with John Gannon.
Okay, yep, one at a time. So Mr. Driscoll, could you maybe just, and so you raised your hand. Did you want to speak to that point?
Yeah, yes, I do, Mr. Chairman. I think as you're looking at this guideline tonight, you're looking at fiscal year 2021 budget policy guideline and the development of the fiscal year 2022 budget policy guidelines for council's consideration in November. I would like to remind everyone that the budget and fiscal oversight adopted conceptual recommendations on the fiscal year 21 to 25 capital improvement program, and conceptual recommendation number 28, because it's not only this budget policy guideline and a couple more that'll be coming up, is, and I'll read it as follows, is concur with the town manager's recommendation for the town council to continue discussion on the following items: reuse of town buildings, which are the former North Branch Library and former police station, record storage management and related issues, Department of Public Works staging areas, another budget policy guideline. And the last one is acquisition of land for open space and recreation use. So that is a existing fiscal, it's not only an existing fiscal year 21 budget policy guideline with the development of the fiscal year 21 budget, is also a conceptual recommendation. So I would respectfully suggest to all the comments coming up, there will be discussion with town council, even though tonight's agenda is the development of fiscal year 2022 budget policy guidelines, there will be discussion with town council on the conceptual recommendation forthcoming during fiscal year 2021, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, good. Thank you. So does that answer everybody's question on that one?
For now.
Okay, there's going to be a lot more discussion. Believe me, it's like, it's been a long time. I'd like to get this moving. All right, so anybody, let's see. So that is, let's see, I lost my place here. Okay, so going back. So, all right, so agree to keep it as is.
Well, I guess, Vinny, based on the comments from Elodia Thomas, does it make sense to eliminate the reference to the Community Preservation Committee and just have it read based on a final policy direction to be developed by the town council, develop a budgetary plan to meet the acquisition of land for open space and recreational use?
Well, as I said earlier, I think the Community Preservation Committee has a role to play in developing the budgetary plan. I think that was one of the key reasons the CPA was passed. So I just got a little bit of a philosophical problem. Say, well, we want to acquire land for open space, but we don't want the CPC to be involved in figuring out how to pay for it.
Vinny, I'm going to say again, we are not initiators. We evaluate proposals. And I think that's a bogus thing that's in there for our input. Somebody has to come up with a plan, put it in front of the CPA. This is what we'd like to do. This is what our idea is. What do you think?
Right.
I know we're delayed on the plan because of COVID, but really, please read the CPA ruling. We don't disagree often, but we're going to disagree on this one.
Well, this is exactly what I said. Input from the CPC about whether to be involved in the budgetary plan for acquiring the land. I mean, that's what, are you saying that the CPA would have no role to play in funding for acquiring land for open space?
We definitely could have a role to play, but when I read this, I read it as though we have input on the planning of how we should acquire this land right now and put it before the CPA, the CPC. No, somebody in this.
Okay.
Well, I just don't like the word input.
Okay,
It's just.
Hold on a second. There is input. Okay. And we discussed this last year when we wrote this, and you were there, obviously. But there is
the year before.
And the year before. But there's a comma there. The final policy decision is developed by the council, and with input from the Community Preservation Committee to develop a budgetary plan. So that's the next step. And in my mind, it is very clear that if we are going to acquire open space, and we've talked about our top choice for what to acquire, the Community Preservation Committee funds are going to play a role in that. I'm not saying the Community Preservation Committee has no role in identifying the land to acquire. That is
Correct.
That is absolutely true. I don't think anybody's saying that. Everybody knows what the law says and how it works. But that doesn't mean that the Community Preservation Committee would not have a role in helping to put together the budgetary plan and how we're going to do it.
We're a potential funding source. That's what I see it.
Right. Well, that's what the budget's all about, is funding. So,
Right.
Vinny,
But
Vinny, trying not to wordsmith this too much, but
yeah,
if
really.
we,
Thank you, Anthony.
if we just delete the end input from the Community Preservation Committee, and then at the end, after recreational use, add a comma, including the review of proposals submitted by the Community Preservation Committee?
well, they would not submit proposals.
We don't, that's right. We don't submit proposals.
They're going to vote on proposals that go to the council, and then we decide whether or not to fund them or not, correct?
So,
Correct.
So whatever the correct wording for that procedure would be.
so
If the
what if we,
concern is about input,
so what's important to me is to keep the community preservation as part of this goal. Okay. So if we were to take and input from the Community Preservation Committee and move that to the end and say, including proposals submitted to the Community Preservation Committee?
Well, open up to not just the input from the Community Preservation Committee, because the Conservation Commission has statutory powers to hold open space, to identify open space, to purchase it. So they do have, and to receive funds in order to purchase open space. So I think we need to expand the input to just beyond the Community Preservation Committee. Yeah, and also what I see essentially, we need a list of properties that if one comes up, we authorize the town manager to go scoop an option or seek a, you don't have to buy the entire property. You can just buy a path easement, a recreation easement, over a hiking trail, for example. You don't have to buy the whole thing, but we need to give the town manager that direction. And then we secure at least an option, and then we work on the funding. And if that, we contingent, we make an offer contingent on funding from various sources. If we can't get the funding, then we lose that right.
Right. And people, I just want to okay, we're getting off track here. This guideline is not to determine what property to buy. That's the policy, final policy direction from the council.
Correct.
And of course, the council is going to talk to the Conservation Commission and anybody else. This is all about funding, only funding. And the funding, a funding source is the CPA, which is why I think it's important to have it there. I think we would be derelict in our responsibility as councilors to say, let's go off and acquire open space and ignore the CPC. I just want to see, I see Kenny Woodland had his hand up and he hasn't had a chance to speak. Okay, Kenny? Ken, you're on mute. Well, I don't know, I can't see him. Elisa, did you have another comment to make?
Well, I was just gonna say, I think part of the feeling is that the way this is worded, it comes across as like somehow this precludes us from inquiring open space unless we have input from the CPC. And I don't think that's what you intend for it to say. And I think I had similar thoughts as Anthony of the wordsmithing of just putting that towards the end as far as working with CPC from a budgetary point of view. So just thought I would share that perspective of how the guideline, I think, reads and why it doesn't sit well, perhaps with Elodie or with me, which is why I was like developing a plan with the town council, because we will be working with everyone that we can and that's appropriate as well, not just acquiring, but identifying a budget as well.
So, okay, that is great. So based on what Anthony suggested, the input from John and input from Elodia, if we delete if we delete the phrase "and input from the Community Preservation Committee" and add to the very end after recreational use, comma, including proposals submitted to the CPC or Community Preservation Committee. Would that satisfy, from what I'm hearing, that would satisfy everybody's needs? Can we make it clear that the CPC is involved in reviewing proposals for the acquisition of open space as opposed to input for developing the plan for acquisition?
May I add one thing, Vinny?
Sure.
I'm sorry, I don't know if you can see, my hand is left up. I think it really should be based on a final policy direction to be developed by the town council and the conservation commission. Because if money is bought, if land is bought through the CPC, you need to have a conservation restriction on that land. If the town is going to buy the land, then that's a whole different ball of wax in terms of how CPC monies can be used to develop land or to improve land. So there's nuances to this. So to me, it's the town council and the Concom are involved with putting the, looking at the properties for potential acquisition and a plan. And at the end, yes, we are a potential funding source, absolutely. But we are not involved with the input. And input to me means that we are involved in the initial plan to select a piece of property and to say, hey, let's buy this. We don't do that. So that's what I'm trying to get across.
Right, and this proposed change would do that by making it clear that the CPC is.
But I'd also like to throw in the weight of the Concom.
Okay, I will point out, okay, and we're getting a little off track here. The final policy decision is the town council alone, and the town council will get input from everybody they need to get input with, including potentially the Conservation Commission, as well as perhaps other land trusts. But we don't need to specify, our job is not to specify what the policy is. This is strictly about identifying funding. So I don't want to get off track by adding conditions on what the policy direction is. The final policy direction is developed by the town council, period. That's the way it works. So I'm going to, we got to move forward. We're already almost to 9:30 here. So I'm going to ask if we would be happy to change this, modify to read, based on final policy direction to be developed by the town council, develop a budgetary plan to meet the identified need for acquisition of land for open space and or recreational use, comma, including proposals submitted to the Community Preservation Committee. So, Councilor Kuhnel, so you're okay with that?
Well, I think the option should still continue to be there if in fact we wanted input from other entities. That option would be there. And that was the intent of the original wording. So I'll go along with whatever you folks want to do, but that was my take on it last year and the year before.
Okay. But would you be okay with that revision? I mean, just sort of rearranging it to make it clear that the CPCs.
I don't think it makes it any clearer.
Okay.
Angie's wrong.
Councilor Donato, would you?
Thank you, Ms. Lodia.
Okay, people, don't make me have to start muting people. Okay, Anthony, would you be okay with that rewording?
Please don't tell me that I'm wrong. That's my opinion.
Okay.
Yes, I would be okay with the revised language.
Okay, so, and I would be okay with it because I made that proposal. Angie, for the official, since this is a roll call vote, is that a yes or a no?
Mr. Chairman, I think it's imperative that you control the meeting. And I'm not going to be told by someone in the audience that my opinion is wrong. That's totally inappropriate.
Yes, I agree. So that's, so it's, so it's entirely up to you. I just want to just record you as a,
It's a no.
It's a no? Okay.
It's a no.
Okay. We're approaching 9:30 and I think it's going on 3 hours and I think we should call it a day. I was hoping to get through this, but it doesn't look like we're going to do that. The last thing is, here's an easy one, an easy 2-minute one. 2L, identify funding to hire a consultant to assist with the charter review. I would like to agree that we could just remove this because that's been done. So Councilor Canales, do you agree with deleting this one?
Yes.
And Councilor Donato?
Yes.
Okay. Okay, so I think maybe we should call it an evening. What do people think?
Vinny, my only suggestion would be that maybe if we can just, the last 3 seem to be pretty straightforward. Maybe if we could just finish those and then we can start the next meeting with the new requests.
I would, that would have been my hope. So if we could, we got, if we spend 3 minutes, a minute apiece, 2M, based on final town council policy, develop a budgetary plan to meet the identified need for DPW staging space. This is, in my mind, still a priority. Do we all agree?
Yes.
Councilor Canellis, do you agree?
Yes.
Councilor Now, do you agree? Okay, I agree also.
And Mr. Chair,
Yes, sir.
as a newcomer to this council, could you speak to which DPW staging space you're talking about? Is that the property between Main Street and Howard Street?
Yes, so this is, if you go to all the way down to, this is related to new item number 16 here.
Right.
This construction of this path is contingent on moving the DPW equipment and staging because the contractors use that for the road construction for the staging area. So we've identified that in the past that we need to find a new DPW staging area in order to complete the construction of this path and clean up that whole area. So,
If I may be heard on that, this staging area has been in effect for easily 25 to 30 years. So the Charles River Path got extended up to Bridge Street in 1995. And this path, this basically junkyard, demolition display, debris area, contractor yard, it doesn't fit zoning for the area. It's ripe for open space. It's ripe for a continuation of bike path. This seems like an issue that's been kicked down the can for decades.
Well, this has only been on this list here, this priority list for 2 years. So,
Okay, so it should have gotten placed 20 years ago.
well, yes. So anyway, so when we get to 16, we'll talk about this a little bit more. But basically, in order to move forward with the path, we got to move the staging yard, and
Right, and that's why it should be a higher priority than.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, there's so many things. Anyway, so that, but we want to keep this because this is very important to that, to the extent.
Absolutely, no, I agree with that.
So 2N, the public art plan, this has been, the MAPC ran 2
Vinny,
public.
do we have to take a voice vote on 2M, just for the record?
2M. Oh, I thought we did. Yeah, did we already vote on 2M?
No.
I don't believe so.
No, you didn't.
Okay, the DPW staging, okay, maybe this is what's happening. It's like we get too late and it's like we all get punch drunk here. All right, so 2M, keep as is, Council Canellis,
Yes.
Council Donato,
Yes.
and myself is a yes. 2N is the public art plan. The MAPC, we hired MAPC to develop this. Two forms on October 30th, 2019 and January 9th, 2020. And then the entire process has been delayed by COVID-19. So the MAPC has not completed their work. So I would agree to just leave this as is until this process is complete. Councilor Canellis, do you agree?
Yes.
Councilor Donato, do you agree?
Yes.
Okay, so we'll leave that as is. And then
I'm sorry, just can I ask why this is not part of, enhanced resources for community development planning? Are we not anticipating the planning department implementing a public art plan?
we
Why
are,
is this its own guideline?
because this has if you read it, you'll see that this has a funding source, and what we anticipate, the way the plan is written, we would anticipate that it would create two things. If you remember the MAPC things, it would be.
But no, that's fine. It's just that
It's a funding source.
to clarify, I'm sorry, I'm being selfish because it is late and probably should just ended the meeting. But if a specific guideline already has a funding source in the future, we can pull it out and have it its own guideline, even though it's part of another department.
Well, I think you misunderstand how this works. So one thing would be creating a fund where perhaps tax dollars could be appropriated into a public art fund. And the other piece of it would be creating some sort of process with a committee to identify what art to fund and how money would be taken out of the fund. So think of it more like not quite a revolving fund, but something like fund would be appropriated into it and then fund would be dispersed out of it. So it would still be run by the Department of Community Development and Planning, by the existing staff, but this is a separate kind of funding that's separate from the departmental funds, right? It would perhaps be part of the capital improvement program. I'm not quite sure how we decide we're going to do it because we actually haven't finished the work. So it's different than just adding money to the department. The department would actually provide the resources to do it within their existing staff, right? But it's
Okay, I understand what you're saying. I'm just thinking, complete streets, other grants and how things work. But I don't want to take any more time. I'm happy to talk to you more about my thoughts around budgeting in the future.
Yeah, Complete Streets, works through sort of the capital improvement program, right? So, and then, so the last one is the use of, John, did you have a question about the 2N?
Did I?
I don't know, is your hand was up or is that up from the last?
Oh, I'm
time?
sorry, that was the old one. Sorry about that.
Okay, no, sorry, I'm losing track. And then the last one is reuse of the former North Branch Library. This is, we've had many discussions about this in the past. The former police station decision on that has been tied up with the feasibility study for the high school. So I would just say, I would be happy to keep it as is because we are still trying to figure out what to do this. Councilor Canellis, are you okay with keeping it as is?
I am.
Councilor Donato, are you?
I'm comfortable.
Okay, as am I. All right, so that gets us all the way to the end. So when we pick up next Monday, we'll pick up starting at new item number 1 for the expenditure things. And then we will go on to the rest of the response for the Sunrise Movement reply. Did you? I just so Angie and Anthony, how did you want to work out a reply to that? did you want me, when I do write up these notes, to sort of pull out the pieces and sort of work on that as a rough draft, or do you want to, how do you want to do that?
That's an excellent idea. Thank you for bringing it forward.
I'd be grateful if that's something you could handle for us.
Okay, I can do that. And then that way we can, once we go through the new expenditure items, we can maybe take that up afterwards.
May I ask a question, Vinny?
Sure, John.
Where would the public go to find your combined document that we're referring to tonight?
It's a work in progress. So really the only way, what I may do is I may, as I take the notes from today's, I'll type in, I've been taking notes as we've been talking. I'll type them in, and what I'll do is I'll have Marilyn attach it to the agenda for next week. So they'll be able to see sort of everything we've done so far.
Great idea, and thank you for that.
That's normally we have meetings in the third floor conference room and I make copies for everybody who shows up, but this is a little bit right. So I will definitely do that. So I'll attach to the next agenda. That's great. Thank you for reminding me to do that. All right.
Vinny, just for the record, I want to state that I did not receive any emails from any residents.
Okay. So we did, I did note, that the 25 that we got, which so far, so if we'll see if but thank you. So during the meeting, nobody emailed. That's good too.
That is correct.
All right. So before we adjourn, did anybody want to make any, have any last comments? Or are we all set for tonight? Because it's already 20 minutes to 10.
I'm all set.
All right. So that being said, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second. Roll call. Councilor Canellis.
Yes.
Councilor Donato.
Yes.
And
Councilor Picciarelli?
Is a yes. So thank you all. And so we will reconvene next Monday at 6:30 p.m.
Good night.
Good night,
Okay,
everyone.
Good night, everyone.
Bye.